Joey Logano wins, but a lot of people are unhappy with the championship system, so let's get into it. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. All right, Joey Logano gets his 36th win of his NASCAR Cup Series career. That puts him at a tie with a familiar friend, former teammate Brad Keselowski. They're both tied for 24th on the all-time NASCAR wins list. And of course, this win right here becomes his third championship, all in the playoff format. But it also puts him on a list with other drivers that have 3 championships. The list, of course, includes Lee Petty, David Pearson, Cale Yarborough, and Darrell Waltrip, and Tony Stewart. One below, of course, Jeff Gordon, who has 4 and 7 apiece, so he is 4 away from Richard Petty, Jimmy Johnson, and Dale Earnhardt Sr. And before I get into the next part, because there's been a lot of criticism and talk about the championship system, a lot of criticism and talk about the championship winner, I do want to say this. The rules at the beginning of the season were the same for everybody, so Joey Logano is a legitimate champion. Him and Team Penske have figured out this particular championship format, just like Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson figured out the chase format. Team Penske has figured out this format better than the other teams so far. But with that being said, I do think there is a fair criticism of this championship system itself, a criticism I've made basically since I've had this channel. So that is to say, I'm not going to hate the player because I think that's anti-productive, and I think it hurts your argument overall because they're just going to throw it back in your face. You're just upset because you're a Joey Logano hater, which is a fair criticism from their perspective, but I am going to hate the game. I'm not going to hate the player, but I am going to hate the game, and here is why specifically this season I'm going to hate the game, and I think it has opened up a lot of people's eyes to what exactly this playoff system is. So we'll just start off with this list right here. This season alone, we have had somebody who was 30th or something in points wreck somebody to win a race to get into the playoffs. We've had somebody that was below 30 in points win a race legitimately and get into the playoffs in Harrison Burton. The previous one, of course, I'm talking about Austin Dillon. We've had several drivers that were outside of the top 16 in points win a race and get into the playoffs. We've seen that before, but it became more exaggerated this year with the aforementioned 2 instances I mentioned earlier. We had a guy skip a race, obviously, with Kyle Larson and still made the playoffs. We had blatant race manipulation at Martinsville from Team Chevy, and we also had some manipulation from Team Toyota, who was reacting to it, which is no better, in my opinion. If somebody burns your house down, you don't go back and burn their house down, because then you're both dummies and you're both going to get put in jail. So you shouldn't have reacted to it that way, but that's a different conversation for this. Let me continue on the list here. And we also had someone get DQ'd, and so Joey Logano could advance. So what we end up with is a champion who finished an average finish of 17th, but he becomes our Cup Series champion because that's how this system is laid out. And that's what I want to focus on here is this system. This playoff format, this system that we have now was put in place by Steve Phelps because it's easy to market. Now, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it, but things that are easy to market are typically what you would call a gimmick. In fact, Slap Shoes has a great video about how this playoff format is basically a gimmick, and it's not a legitimate way of figuring out and determining a good champion. It's not a good way of figuring out who had the best season in racing, in auto racing. No other auto racing other than NASCAR associated stuff like Xfinity trucks has a playoff system. It's just in motorsports, it's not a good way to determine who a champion is. And there's always these references to stick and ball sports, and I think that does this a great disservice because racing is not like a stick and ball sport. It's just not like them. So you can't compare their playoffs to these playoffs. And once again, I'm not hating on Joey Logano. I'm hating on the system, like I've done since I've had the channel. But this is just not a legitimate system because at the end of the day, it is a gimmick. Gimmicks are easy to market, but guess what? They lose interest in time. And I think that's as big a problem NASCAR is having right now as anything else. We've seen this for several years now. And for several years, people have continued to lose interest in it and get even more upset and angry about it. And I've done polls before. I'm not going to do a poll this year because I've done it in the past. I feel like it might skew slightly higher this season because it'll get the Joey Logano bump and just all of the stuff that I mentioned earlier. But usually it's 60-40. 60% of people don't like the playoff format as it's currently structured, and 40% of the people like the playoff format the way it's currently structured. Now, obviously, there's going to be a bunch of people jumping in the comments here saying, I want full season points. Basically, everybody wants full season points. The vast majority, I would say that 60%, we want full season points. But however, I live in the real world. And in the real world, NASCAR is not going to go back to full season points because of the TV contract that they have in place. So your best opportunity to go back to full season points is the ratings crater, and TV renegotiates the contract and gives NASCAR more power. So we're at least 5 years away from that happening, right? So I'm living in the real world where the playoffs are going to be a thing. So if the playoffs are going to be a thing, the best we can hope for is to get the playoffs basically reconfigured from what it is now. You can't have what you currently have because it's just too opportunistic. It doesn't leave a good feeling at the end of the season for the vast majority of people. Sans, in this case, Joey Logano fans. Sans last year, Ryan Blaney fans. And, of course, the year before that, Joey Logano fans. So on, so forth. Occasionally, you get a winner that would have won under any format, any circumstance. I think one of the years that Kyle Busch won, he would have won in basically any format that you had in front of you. I think Kyle Larson, I'm pretty sure Kyle Larson, the year he won, he would have won the Chase format, he would have won Winston Cup points, and he would have won, and obviously he did win the playoff deal. So every once in a while you get one of those where it's just such a good year, it doesn't matter what the person does. But you also, on the backside of that, have years with like Kevin Harvick, who won 10 races, and I can't remember if he even made the Final Four that year, but didn't win the championship. So what I think needs to happen is figure out a system. I think the Chase was a great system. Jimmy Johnson just ruined it by winning 5 in a row. But the Chase system or something like it, go something close to that. We don't have to skew all the way to this one race determines a champion, because I think that's what sort of gets a lot of people upset in this current format. We do, and we don't have to go all the way to 10 races, although I think the bigger the sample size, the more legitimate the championship would be. But I think you can find a happy medium in there. A lot of people have argued for 3 races. I'm not for that. I'm still for, I'd rather have a chase or something like that. But there are options. It doesn't matter which option you fall on. There are options out there to make the playoff system like we see it now a better system that is more conducive to crowning a champion that people won't immediately just be upset about or have a bad feeling about when the season ends. So that's pretty much where I stand on it. I know we're not getting rid of the playoffs, but I do think they can be reconfigured. And NASCAR said we're not getting rid of the playoffs, and they did it in a less than graceful manner. But they did at least say that we will look at it in the offseason and it possibly will get reconfigured. So I think that's the best we can hope for in this scenario. But of course, the comment section is open, so let me know down in the comments below what you would like to see. So those were the 2 bigger things that are being talked about on social media, but we also had some other things going on here. Most notably, Stuart Hos Racing is shutting down after this year, so this was the final run for Stuart Hos Racing. Noah Gragson in the final gets the best finishing position in the final run for Stuart Hos Racing. He was able to do a burnout after the race to send Stuart Hos Racing off in style, so it's just going to be really weird next year. It'll be a Haas factory team. There will still be 1 car there, so there will still be the remnants of SHR, but SHR is gone. It is Haas factory now, down to 1 car. So that'll be something to get used to for sure next season. Somebody else we won't be seeing next year will be Martin Truex Jr. Heck of a career. Great champion, former champion. He won the pole for this race. I mean, he went out in style. That paint scheme was absolutely amazing. But not seeing Martin Truex Jr. run full-time. He will run probably the Daytona 500 for 2311 if they can get that figured out. So with everything going on with them right now, we're not going to talk about the lawsuit. We're going to make one video not talking about the lawsuit, right? So Martin Truex Jr. being gone, that'll be different for a lot of fans. He's been driving for as long as they've been alive. Another thing that's been on, at least on a car for as long as most fans have been fans, is the FedEx paint scheme on Denny Hamlin. Apparently that is going away according to the post from Denny Hamlin. So FedEx is no longer going to be with us either. So end of an era there. And another ending of an era, of course, is going to be Kyle Busch with the 19 seasons with a win. That ended on Sunday as well. So just a lot of stuff going to be different for next season, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But those are some of the bigger ones right there. Kroger officially moving over to RFK with Ryan Preece, so the 47 will no longer have Kroger on it. So that's going to be something different to look at, but at least Kroger will still be in the sport. And Carson Hocevar won Rookie of the Year. So Carson Hocevar, Rookie of the Year, and Chevy wins the manufacturer's points. So, yeah, I think that's all I got for you on this one. I'm not going to do the top 10. I'm not going to do the good race, bad race, because obviously it was mostly bad race because of a lot of people just don't like the championship system. A lot of people finally realizing that this is what can happen in the championship system, which I've been saying for a while. So I'm not a fan of the system either, but Joey Logano is a legit champion because he had the same rules as everybody else. I just want the system to at least be tweaked or changed a little bit. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. That's all I got for you in this one. If you made it this far, would love to have your subscription. If not, I'll keep making these things. I keep going all season. I don't take an off-season break or anything like that. So the videos will keep coming. Live streams on Tuesdays will keep coming. So check me out. Check us out. And yeah, that's it. Enjoy your off-season, and we'll see what happens next Sunday, what everybody's doing next Sunday. All right. Till then. Peace.